Sinead works in the cardiac rehab team in the Mater Hospital, and so has a wealth of experience dealing with people in the acute phase of their diagnosis with their heart condition, and also helping those when they're living with or have a chronic condition. Sinead also has a significant interest in mindfulness and stress management, and we're really delighted to be able to listen and hear from her today. So welcome, Sinead.
Hi there. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here this morning. Lovely Friday morning. So as I've said, my name is Sinead Mulhern, and I'm here to talk about, I suppose, how to be well in a post-cardiac world. And for some of you, that might be more recent and more acute. And for some, that might be that you're living with this for a period of time. So there can be differences between those two things, but both we'll try and cover both, the impact of both of those. So as I said, I work in cardiac rehab in the Mater over the last 10 years. So I've kind of come with a few points this morning from that experience. What we'll focus on, sorry, that's not moving forward. Yeah. Just, I suppose, what's normal, if anything is normal, post-cardiac event, and looking at what the impact of stress can be. And then, I suppose, more importantly, what can we do about it? What kind of help and resources are there? I know the guys have just mentioned some resources in the IHF, and that's really, really helpful. And so we might have some more things in terms of what you might be able to do yourself, and then what else might be available. So I suppose in terms of what the impact of the event itself can be, and again, this can be a condition, which really, I suppose, it's a bit dramatic, this slide, but really I think that's sometimes how it can be felt in terms of lots of different aspects or areas of our lives can feel a little bit overwhelmed, particularly in the beginning, or potentially over time if we're very kind of fatigued and finding it difficult to cope with the day-to-day. So I suppose just kind of across, just highlighting across various aspects of our lives, across kind of work, family, lifestyle, relationships, exercise, sleep, fatigue, our identity, and then I suppose the emotional aspect of that in terms of the anxiety or low mood. We can feel our sense of ourself is vulnerable. Something we felt sure about might suddenly feel unsure, thinking of kind of limits of our life and fear of death. You know, there's nothing really more threatening than having our lives threatened. So it's very hard sometimes to let go of that. So I suppose what's common, you know, normal is often we try and ask ourselves, you know, what's normal? What, am I okay? Am I not okay? I think in terms of, I suppose, the experience that people have in terms of what's common, what do people commonly experience? And I think any of the above, and often we'll just go through some of it just in terms of if people are questioning. Often people, by the time I meet them, they think, oh, if only I'd known this earlier on in the journey, this would make me feel like I wasn't going mad. So I suppose often like that experience, there can be relief at surviving, especially if it's something acute, can be quite dramatic at the time. But sometimes so we can feel well, we can be medically, have got some positive feedback, or that we're coping, we're not an immediate threat. And sometimes it's after that fact that our emotions can surface. It's almost like we exhale then and feel what just happened. And some of the difficult feelings or anxiety can emerge at that point. So I suppose just to say that this is often a journey, you know, especially if we've had maybe a one-off cardiac event that we've had impact on our heart, but we're hoping maybe from a rehab or recovery point of view that we'll be able to resume some of our life activities and lifestyle again. But because we've been medically cleared, sometimes in terms of that journey, you know, psychologically, we have to catch up a little bit. So it can be over a period of time. The recovery process can take a number of months, and that's not unusual. So sometimes people feel like, gosh, I have this medical condition, but now I also have the psychological distress on top of it. And that question about, am I going mad or am I developing problems? That, you know, that's very common. And over time, as we become more confident and comfortable and begin to adjust to this situation, we can understand ourselves a little bit better and feel a little bit more like ourselves. So I suppose in the immediate kind of aftermath of having something happen in hospital or repeated exposure to hospital, you know, there can be panic, anxiety. Sometimes that can be quite traumatic, especially if we've had a near-death experience. Or sometimes kind of medication-wise, we can have experience of delirium, which can be very frightening, and might never have had that before. And that can be quite challenging. Or kind of, you know, afterwards in terms of being discharged home, can feel vulnerable. We can have maybe symptoms of post-traumatic stress, which can be quite disarming, you know, that sense of reliving some of the experience. And again, a lot of the time that will settle over a period of time. At home, when we're discharged home, sometimes we can feel quite isolated, that we're the only person who's experienced that. And that's why it can be really helpful in terms of linking in with an association like the Irish Heart Foundation, where we see actually a lot of people have gone through something similar. That occupation or preoccupation with, is it happening again? Will it happen again? That kind of hypervigilance and scanning the body and checking what does that pain mean? What does that twinge mean? So it can take a long time. And that fear of recurrence sometimes can even impact on things like, you know, sleep, afraid to fall asleep, afraid to, I suppose, do things, exercise, do things that we would have done before. So we can kind of start limiting ourselves as well. Human nature, we tend to deny that we're ever going to die. So we have a kind of an inbuilt denial, which is probably healthy-ish in terms of not thinking about the end of our lives a lot of the time, because it's quite upsetting. However, then it can feel like a bit of a bubble being burst when something happens that challenges us and we realize actually we're not going to be here forever. So there's probably a sweet spot in between the two of those, where actually it's probably helpful to live our lives as if we're not going to be here forever, and at the same time not being overwhelmed by that thought or upset by that thought. And how do you get that balance right? And I suppose this is a process of adjustment, and being out of our comfort zone, thinking about something and how we begin to integrate that into our understanding of our lives. But it can be a challenge, and we're kind of built to focus on the problem. What's the threat? What's the danger? It's why the news headlines sell. It's why we kind of orientate very quickly to what's that issue? Not the things that are going well. They're not a threat. So we kind of often just skim over them. But actually, they are the things often that make up our good quality of life. So we might need to actively come back to balance our focus and pull ourselves back from the kind of worry that we might have. It's understandable worry, but it might not be helpful worry. And so as if that wasn't enough, there's more in terms of, I suppose, distress that people can feel over things that might be unfinished or unresolved life issues. And again, this might be an opportunity to look at that. Sometimes people get a sense of grief or anger over what's happened, particularly if, you know, depending on the cause. And sometimes, you know, people can feel a little bit of guilt around, you know, did I cause this? You know, is this something that I did? And from what we know about the cause, you know, very roughly speaking, in terms of, you know, a third of cardiac difficulty might relate to our hereditary, what we've inherited, our biology, if you like. A third might be impacted by our lifestyle, our diet, alcohol, smoking, etc. But a third of people may have had a really good lifestyle and may have not had any history whatsoever, and can be kind of confused and uncertain about that. So sometimes there can be mixed feelings about what's happened in terms of the cause of it. Or if we've had a lot of stress in the build up to this, or have had mental health difficulties prior to this, this can feel really overwhelming. This is another issue on top of that. And it can be very tiring. We can feel very fatigued, especially if it's a chronic condition and we're dealing with kind of chronic medical care. Sometimes that can feel like a part-time job. It can feel a bit overwhelming. Or sometimes people feel a bit vulnerable because they don't feel like themselves. They lost a sense of connection or a sense of meaning or purpose. So whether it's that kind of acute, the shock factor and feel highly kind of agitated and concerned, or whether it's more a kind of chronic difficulty in dealing, how you deal with your day-to-day life, can be challenging. So I suppose thinking about this, so we're in a situation that's challenging, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming, and you think, well, what can I do about this? But actually, what I say to myself about this situation is important. So, for example, if I have, for all of us, we have thoughts about a situation, good or bad, which kind of develop feelings. So how do I feel about the situation? How I feel it in my body, what I might feel like doing, and then what I actually do. And this can be a bit of a cycle that we can get through. And this happens to everybody. And also it goes backwards. If I was better at graphs and things like that, I'd have a two-way street on all of these arrows and maybe even crossing over. So all of these things are really linked together. It's not just a one-way system. And just to kind of give you an example of what I mean, so we might be saying something like, oh, I'm doomed, this is a disaster, this is a really bad situation, might make me feel anxious, feel upset, feel irritated. It'll have an impact on the body. If I feel anxious, it might raise my heart rate, my blood pressure, my breathing might become shorter. I might feel like pulling back. Then I do pull back, or I might be irritated with other people and snap at other people, which might make me feel, yeah, I can't cope with this. This is a disaster. And we can kind of get into a bit of a loop. So we can see why it's difficult enough that we're in this situation, but depending on how we talk to ourselves about the situation, we can actually add another layer of suffering to the problem. Sometimes it's enough to be dealing with the problem itself. Then depending on how I talk to myself about it, am I making it worse? And I suppose from the point of view of what we can control, we can sometimes control a bit better what we say to ourselves. So that's why it can be really important to begin to look at what's my piece in this kind of jigsaw of challenging situation. And I suppose the reason why that might be important, and this is a bit of a busy slide, but essentially it's saying, if we have a lot of kind of negative psychological health, stress, negative outlook, and maybe negative self-talk or anxiety, it can impact on what we do. Maybe we avoid things, maybe we don't exercise, we might smoke more, drink more. The body might be more inflamed if it's stressed. Versus if I'm more positive in my outlook or more positive in my psychological health, I might do more positive things for myself. I might care for myself more. I might exercise more, which will help regulate my body, which will help regulate my breathing, which then will result in kind of improved cardiovascular health, but also improved psychological well-being. So it is important. So sometimes people feel like, oh, I can't do anything about this. How my thoughts happen so quickly. What can I do about this? Sometimes we don't even notice what our thoughts are. So can we begin to slow it down a little bit? If you notice that you feel really upset about something, even just going back a step and saying, what did I just say to myself? Can you catch that thought? Can you name it? And beginning to be more observant of your own thinking can help change how you feel. So even just taking a moment to think about a stressful situation, and maybe what your typical, maybe unhelpful self-talk would be. You don't have to share it with anybody, but just thinking about either your cardiac health or thinking about a situation where you tend to say something negative to yourself about it. So maybe try and catch that. And then thinking, is there anything that you can say back to that thought to challenge it, to help you feel less anxious or angry or irritated? Is that really true? Is that thought fair? Is it true? So for example, you might be saying like, oh, I can't stand this. This is too much. If we are able to stop and pause for a second, catch that thought and say, okay, it is difficult, it's stressful, but I can get through it. Being able to kind of change the tone of how we feel about the situation. It's just that moment to moment in our daily life. Sometimes those thoughts can really kind of spiral. So we have to stop and break the chain of that kind of thinking pattern. Or sometimes we try and kind of come in at the emotion end of it. Is there anything that I can do that I can soothe my emotional experience. Emotions often, negative emotions can often feel scary. But actually emotions are trying to help us. They're trying to shine a light on what we need. So we can actually use them to help ourselves. So if we, every time we notice anxiety or distress, being able to ask, what is this emotion saying that I need? So again, maybe just taking a moment and thinking about that stressful situation or where you were talking to yourself negatively. Just notice what your emotion in that situation would be. What feeling would be associated with that thought? And then asking yourself, what is that emotion saying that you need? And sometimes it can take a minute or two to kind of even figure that out. It can take longer. Sometimes one word pops up. That's enough. And so, for example, anxiety or anger are often trying to protect us. They're trying to do a job to protect us, like, I need more support. Mind yourself in this situation. Have you checked everything's okay? So it's trying to do what it thinks we need, but sometimes we just do it too much. Overwhelm sometimes reflects that we need time out. So maybe we need to stop and actually listen to it instead of maybe pushing away some of our difficult emotions, maybe listening to them. They have a wisdom as well. And honoring the body and our feelings is just as important sometimes. But sometimes going in at the body, regulating our breath is key. So fight or flight is a kind of an inbuilt reaction that we all have. Animal kingdom, humans over thousands of years have developed this really quick, fast fight or flight response to threat. The problem is that we have developed this really big brain since our original kind of older instinct of fight or flight. And this big brain does lots of thinking, and it can visualize things. It can predict things in the future. It can remember things from the past, which is fantastic. But it can also do that in relation to problems. But the body is just able to deal with something that's right in front of it. So if I start thinking about my problems or thinking about my past and difficulty and predicting things or saying this is terrible, this is going to be a disaster, my body sometimes is in high fight or flight a lot of the time. And it's over activated. So one of the best ways, so there's a mismatch between the brain and the body can sometimes be overactivated and the brain can be overactivated in terms of fight or flight. So we can feel very alert, feel ready to run or fight against something. Our heart rate might be up, our adrenaline might be up, we're ready to go, the muscle tension is up. And that can be kind of either a low level of ongoing stress or in extreme worry, kind of high level, we can feel palpitations. So what can be really helpful in that moment is to regulate the breath. So either do what your body is trying to do, which is move. Body's trying to run, move, walk, or breathe. Let out a big long sigh. If you notice distress or anxiety in the body, just let out a couple of long sighs. Sometimes we do that naturally. Sometimes we might need to remember to do it. Or getting into our head and imagining relaxing. Or mindfulness practice is another way of doing it, which just simply means following the breath, taking a few moments to just notice the breath and follow the breath without thinking about the worries that we have in our mind. So again, just thinking about a time when you were stressed, or in that imagination exercise there, just notice what tends to happen in your body when you are stressed. Do you hunch up? Do you get a headache? Do you get tense? Does your jaw clenched? Does your adrenaline go up? Does your heart rate go up? And using that as a tell sign for yourself to say, actually, I need to breathe. Exhale, move, or actively try and relax the body. So this is, again, a bit of a busy slide, but just to look and say, okay, so I might be coping with stress by talking to myself in a unhelpful way, like saying, I can't cope, this is too much, it's a disaster, make me feel anxious, have an elevated heart reaction, blood pressure, tension in the body. Then I might want to do things like take alcohol or work harder to get my difficulty dealt with, withdrawal. So instead, we've just talked a little bit about there, and this is putting it all in one slide about from my thoughts perspective, can I recognize what's happening? Can I catch it? Can I name it? Can I ask myself, is this helpful? Is it true? Can I challenge my critical talk? Or can I accept it and let it go? Yes, this is tough. This is not helpful for me to think about this right now, and kind of exhale. Positive kind of support, or talk to someone, get some support. I'm doing the best that I can. Regulating the body, taking time out, slowing down, exercise, minding the body, self-care, sleep, diet, huge. Or behaviors like, can I face this instead of avoiding it? My urge might be to avoid it. Can I face it and move towards it? Can I make kind of stepped care goals around changing my habits? Can I exercise? Can I take care of myself? And again, slowing down. Smile. What are the things in my daily life that make me smile? What brings me joy? What can I follow that's helpful? It's kind of the antidote to the anxiety and the stress sometimes, but we can often forget about it. So kind of moving into a sense of, okay, what is the silver lining in this situation? We're often unaware that we are mortal, and we get threatened when we remember it, or we're forced to remember it because we've had a health problem. We're hardwired. There's that biological urge to focus on danger. So our brain finds it difficult to let go of it. So we have to figure out how to actively override our anxiety and to pull our brains back from going there. Because actually, I've survived. I am here today, and being able to bring the brain to that idea of that glass being half full. And that sometimes feels difficult to do because we're thinking about, but this nearly happened, or this could happen, or this might happen in the future, and it can be overwhelming. But actually, being able to focus on the things that we are grateful for and bigging that up in our mind, because what we focus on gets bigger in our brain. If I'm focused on the problem all day long, that's all I'm thinking about. Our brains aren't that, well, we can't think about too many things at one time. So if we can actively kind of train the brain to come back to things that we appreciate, things that feel good, things that are positive, we're going to have a much better quality of life. Asking, how do I want things to be? What's meaningful to me? We've had a near-death experience. We remember that we're not going to be here forever. How do I want to live the rest of the time that I've got, however long that is? And if I'm bringing good attention to that, I'll probably be doing the best that I can. So if I'm finding this overwhelming, can I get support for it? If I'm just not taking care of myself well enough, what do I need to do to face that and begin to kind of add in more value to my life? Things that I look forward to, things that bring me a sense of joy, whether it's people, nature, hobbies, spirituality, doing something meaningful, a sense of purpose, a job, volunteering, family, whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is, but we need to have some of it in our daily experience, not just once a year on a big occasion. So we have some choices to make. What matters to me? Where do I want to spend my attention? Where do I want to spend my energy? What gives me a sense of connection to myself, sense of value, sense of purpose? So we're kind of caught in this situation of being disappointed and frustrated and at a loss, and also being grateful and appreciative of where we're at. And how do we accept that, yes, we're vulnerable, things are imperfect, but we also can do more in terms of building up our quality of life? How do I learn to appreciate what's important and let go of things that are unhelpful? Can I recognize them? Maybe toxic lifestyle habits, relationships, stressors. How can I let go of these? And sometimes it's just bit by bit. We're not going to do it all in one go, but we might be able to chip away at it. Are there things that I can do that help to soothe myself? This is a nice little kind of description of, like, if I'm just running on reserve all the time, I have nothing left. It's very difficult, whereas can I boost my physical well-being, my emotional well-being, or my mental well-being? If I'm running off a full charge, I'm much more able to deal with a difficult day But I have to actually take care to do that. It doesn't just happen. It's effortful to be able to take care in that way. So how might I do this? How do I want to live my life? Controlling the controllables. What are the things I can control? Picking one thing. Sometimes we only focus on things when they go wrong. Whereas with, appliances in our lives, we check the NCT once a year, we check the washing machine once a year, the boiler. We often don't check in with ourselves only when things go wrong. So can we be a bit more proactive in terms of the 4 pillars of wellness, say our exercise, diet, sleep, and self-care? If we have a bit of a handle on these, or maybe one of these areas is worse than the other, it's not rocket science. We know this already. We know that these things help us to weather difficulty. But what does it take for me to do it? What would it take for me to actually care for myself in that way? Or maybe you're doing a pretty good job on that already. So well done, which is really good. And you notice the positive effect of it. Can I build a self-awareness to recognize my needs? And sometimes we have to change the pace. Sometimes we have to slow down. Sometimes we have to tune into ourselves. Or sometimes people find that maybe they've gone to retirement stage and they're bored, and maybe they want to become more active. They miss some of the things that they were doing previously. And maybe looking at volunteering or connecting in with people in a different way. So beginning to respond to things rather than react. If I'm a little bit slower, a little bit more tuned in, doing something like regular relaxation or self-care or mindfulness practice, I might be able to make a response to something rather than react. If I'm under stress and pressure, I'm often reacting quickly without thinking. Whereas sometimes I can slow it down and say, okay, what do I want to do here? Do I have a choice? Yeah, noticing what charges your battery. Sometimes it's hobbies, sometimes it's things we gave up years ago, and we have time now maybe to look at that. Find what makes you feel good and follow that. And if you think, God, I don't know what that is, then maybe try to be brave and step out of your comfort zone and think, actually, it could be this. If you look at other people and think, oh, I'd love to do that, maybe we could try it. So again, this is probably just a bit of a summary, but we're recognizing our thought patterns, trying to build awareness of what stresses you and what your reactions are. Observe yourself in action. Can you catch yourself talk? What should I just say to myself? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it fair to myself? Can I challenge it? Can I let it go? Observe your feeling, not fueling the fire. There's that old Indian proverb which talks about the 2 wolves fighting, and in terms of, and I'm doing a very bad job now of describing it, but the 2 wolves, where there is the wolf of, is it hatred and love, and it's they're saying, which one wins, and it's the one that we fuel, it's the one that we feed. If I'm feeding my anxiety or my distress or my anger in relation to something, that's what grows. So can I actively try to build it? Sometimes feels uncomfortable or unusual to do that, but we get better at it. Noticing what makes me feel good, what impacts my behavior. And give yourself some time slowing down to do it. Okay, so that's, yeah, so just allowing emotion to arise. Sometimes that feels distressing, but it will pass. It can pass if we breathe into it and allow it. Creating more helpful thoughts. I'm doing okay. I'm doing better than I think. I have support. Trying the best that I can. Can we introduce a kinder tone to how we speak to ourselves? Can we spend time relieving tension and distress? And maybe monitoring our progress. See if I'm improving. Feed your wellness. Okay. So I suppose in summary then, these are some, I suppose, kind of post-cardiac growth. I'm in a different world now than I was prior to this. It's not one maybe where I expected to find myself, but I'm here, and I can either spend time focused on the negative aspects of this, or can I learn about myself and rise to the challenge of how can I live in a world with this condition or with difficulty that I might not want or choose, but can I accept and can I adjust to it? And we find that people who tend to do better are people who try to integrate this into their lives and adjust in a way that's helpful and that's kind. So not giving out to ourselves about it, not fighting against it, not wishing it wasn't there. It's actually, okay, it's here. How can I deal with this as best I can? That's the best I can do. Being able to use the body to help focus with threat and danger, difficulty, stress, move the body, allow it to move, regulate the breath. How do I challenge, and we talked about that there, challenging negative thoughts, treating the body well. Sometimes we are like, just the head is above the body and we feel like they're not connected. The two are connected. If I'm treating my head well, my body feels better. If I'm treating my body well, my head will feel better. It's a two-way street. And then finding the joy, follow what makes me feel good and give time to that, because if we're not going to do it now, when are we going to do it? We need to be able to give that to ourselves, because nobody else is going to do it for us. So I suppose thinking maybe just for a moment, what is it that you do to unwind? Are there things that make you feel good? Even just taking a moment to notice. And sometimes that can be an instant kind of emotional, oh, I love that. I could have more of that. What instantly makes you smile? Maybe it's a person, place, an activity, you know, and what would it take for me to build in a little bit more of it? And sometimes that means having to say no to other things in order to say yes to yourself, and giving yourself time to do that. And I'm just going to mention a little bit about mindfulness. You know, most of us a lot of the time have our heads are full. Where are we with our headspace? Is it chock-a-block with things that we're trying to do? And sometimes if we're very tired, that can feel overwhelming as well. Or sometimes anxiety is driving that even more. I have to do this, have to do that. So being able to create a little bit of time to practice. Some people don't like mindful breathing at all, but it can be really helpful in managing stress, mood, health conditions, pain, cardiac issues, chronic pain. You know, there's a load of research to show how helpful it can be. And there's lots of stuff online. I have some resources on the last slide. But simply it just means, because people think, oh, what is that about? It just simply means paying attention to one thing in the present moment by slowing down and focusing maybe on the sensations in the body or breathing, and trying not to pay any attention to all the chatter that goes on in your head. But that's automatic. So we, oh, have to do this, have to do that. So instead we try to come back to the breath. Focus your attention on the breath for 1 minute, for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes. Or listen to a mindfulness exercise that helps you try and keep on track. There's loads of research to say that it's really helpful in terms of quality of life and well-being. So just invite you, if you're interested or you have a question about it, to maybe check out some of the resources that are there. And I think there's some available within the IHF as well. So that's really, really helpful. Okay, so just to kind of end on this piece, you know, where did you find that? I've been searching for it everywhere. I created it myself. So happiness. So it's very simple. It's oversimplifying, but there is an element in it in which we can maybe move towards this ourselves in terms of trying to build up our sense of self and our sense of self-care. Okay, and just there's some resources there, and you're welcome to use that page there. In terms of the stress control series, is 6 pre-recorded sessions in relation to cognitive behavioral therapy and stress management. The Living Well is a program that's run freely as well. It's a chronic disease self-management program, or there's some kind of resources and tools online. On the Matter website, on the wellbeing page, there's some mindfulness relaxations, and there's information on cardiac rehab as well. Or Beaumont also have some mindfulness relaxation psychology tools. There's a 4-week mindfulness course run by Fiona O'Donnell on A Lust for Life website. Breathworks. My Mind is a low-cost, free service in terms of psychological support, or if you're between the ages of, if you're younger, under 25, Jigsaw's offers free sessions. Often in people's place of work, there's the EAP, the Employee Assistance Programme as well, or the National Counselling Service, if you've a longer history of difficulty in terms of prior trauma or emotional or physical abuse or anything like that. In terms of if you have a medical card, there's counselling and primary care can be available, or psychology within primary care for non-medical card holders. Or if you feel like actually things are really overwhelming, or there's somebody that I might be concerned and feel unable to cope, and feeling like you need to talk to somebody, starting maybe with the GP, or if you were ever concerned about yourself or anybody else in relation to very high level of stress and felt I can't go on, Pieta House offers a really nice quick service to be able to contact them on the phone, and to offer kind of a quick service there for somebody that you were worried about their safety, or the emergency department. Probably shouldn't end on that note, but that's taken me to the end of the slides.